Welcome to College Report, where young college students come together to talk about the different political situations going on in our country today. I'm your host, Ava Bratz, and joining me on our panel today, I have the pleasure of being accompanied by students who have a variety of opinions. Starting right beside me, we have Andrew. Next to him, we have Bailey, and last, Amy. Awesome. Welcome. Thank you so much, guys, for coming. To start off our show today, the race for 2020, the showdown for the president is off to an interesting start, as it always is, with Democratic candidates Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden recently surging to the top of the polls. In addition, the campaign trial has recently been shaken up again after Mayor Pete Buttigieg announcing his campaign will be coming to an end after the South Carolina primary. So, starting off today, our first question, is the Democratic Party, Andrew, in your opinion, too divided with the exit of Buttigieg?
I don't think that it's too divided. I think there's kind of a consensus among the whole party that no matter who the nominee is, whether it's Biden or Sanders, their main goal is to get Trump out of office.
Okay, Bailey, what do you think?
I think they're divided more than we've seen like in past years. I think that especially with certain issues, they can't seem to decide which issue is the most important, which one they're going to run their platforms off of. So I think that they're a little more divided than I've seen.
What about you, Amy? What are you thinking down there?
I'm going to agree with Andrew over here. I've seen, at least on Twitter, a lot more support for Bernie Sanders, but I think the main goal is just to get Trump out of office. At the end of the day, they're going to come together and unite over whatever candidate wins.
It's interesting you bring up social media. I think that's something that Bernie Sanders and Biden don't have a strong grasp with. So, minus social media, what platforms do you think they should really utilize to unite their party?
I think for Biden, he should focus a little bit more. His base tends to come from an older vote, so he should focus more on advertising on Facebook and such. Definitely get out there a little bit more on, I think Facebook is the main one for
Facebook?
Biden. Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, Facebook and Twitter, I would say. I feel most people, when they're looking for politics, different political views, they go to one of those two.
It also depends on what area you're trying to target. I'm going to take the more unconventional approach.
I
and
love
say,
it. Bring it on.
Go to TikTok. If you want to get people our age, that's how you're going to get people.
Do you guys think, again, Pete Buttigieg's exit from the race will allow the party to come together, or more it's going to see as like Warren versus them or Biden versus Sanders? What do you think it's more of like you said, like getting Trump out of office, or what specific ways do you see them, I guess, playing this out? Who do you think is going to win the primary in this kind of hot topic realm?
I think this is the first time that Biden actually has an opening to get the nomination, because the two more moderate candidates, Klobuchar and Buttigieg, both dropped out. So now he can pick up the moderate vote a lot more. Sanders has a more progressive wing. I think Sanders still has a strong ground game in all of the states, but Biden has his first opening since the primaries actually started.
And just recently winning South Carolina as well.
Yes, his first state.
I mean, it was expected for him to win, but still, it's a great traction.
It was, yes, exactly. And that momentum going into Super Tuesday is huge.
So, Amy and Bailey, do you guys think the Democratic Party is moving a little bit more towards too progressive, or do you think they're still staying in more of that moderate? You mentioned it's more divisive than ever before.
Yeah. I think that they're moving to be too progressive, especially like when you have Bernie Sanders really pushing socialism, when you have them really going for pro-abortion, going for gun control. I think they're really moving in a very progressive direction, and it'll be interesting to see how people take that, because I feel like people kind of like to stay in the middle instead of going too far to one side.
I think social media, Bailey, you brought up how Bernie Sanders has a very large presence on Twitter, and a lot of people our age have Twitter, and they're taking Twitter as their information and their research, and people are feeding them thoughts, and they're not researching, and they're getting overwhelmed in these different kinds of movements. And I think that has that's a big reason why people are starting to lean more progressively, and I think that's going to continue, especially since he has such a huge following on that kind of a platform.
Do you guys think Bernie Sanders has more of a following than Joe Biden in that way?
I think he has stronger supporters, more passionate supporters. Biden probably has a bigger coalition of people that he could get to vote for him, but Biden definitely has a passionate base that he won't lose no matter what. Whereas Biden tends to have more wishy-washy voters who could go for anybody else.
I definitely think Biden is going to be the presidential candidate that they have. So what do you guys think, hearing that, are the main weapons that he's going to use to go against Trump in the actual election?
I think his experience in the White House, he's going to run, he already has been in all of his debates and speeches running on the Obama record versus the Trump record. So I think that's going to be his main line of attack and kind of a return to normalcy, and be like, he's branding himself as like the decent man in the White House as opposed to Trump's attacks on Twitter and stuff like that. So he's going to try and go for a more just calm presidency and candidate.
Thank you, Andrew. Another huge topic in this election is of course, of health care. Some Democrats have attacked Donald Trump after his administration has repeatedly targeted Obamacare with his plans of ending policies, leaving millions of Americans without coverage. The Democratic Party has recently added health care as one of its top concerns for 2020. Most Democratic candidates have come forward saying that they believe that the United States should have health care for all system. This is also something that soon will affect each of us at this table, as well as anyone going close to the age of 20, 25, you know? So should the government try to regulate health care for Americans, or do you think government should let this market stand as it is? Andrew, what are your thoughts on that?
I would say that it's hard to keep the government completely out of healthcare because unlike other industries where the free market tends to play itself out, when your life is at stake and the medical industry can charge you anything for anything, like a life-threatening illness, you're going to have to pay that. The medical debt in the United States is huge. I think that a lot of Americans definitely want some government regulation on healthcare.
You mentioned paying for it and charge. Do you think all Americans should have to buy and purchase health care?
I don't think that everybody should be required to, but I do think that there definitely should be some avenues for people to get more affordable health care. Because at this point, unless you get it through an employer, which is becoming more and more rare, it becomes very hard to have health care.
And Bailey, we talked a little bit before the show. You're learning a lot more about the logistics that goes into healthcare. What are your opinions on that?
I think the government should stay out of it. I think the less government interference in these kinds of things that are private matters, the better. I think that people can decide what's best for them for the most part, and trying to like require people to buy health care or to do something like that is just not a good thing to do.
And the money does have to come from somewhere. So do you think we should tax the wealthy more in order to achieve that? Or where does that money come? What avenue are we taking for that? What do you guys think?
I definitely don't think that the wealthy should be taxed for something like that, just because they worked for that money, whether we agree with how they got it or however they worked for it, and and to tax them for someone who doesn't have that money, it takes away the initiative, so then people aren't going to want to work for it because they don't have to. And then it's going to just cause more people to just say, I'll just ride on the coattails of someone else.
It'll definitely
Bold statement.
discourage the wealthy from continuing to keep working hard. And that's kind of the issue when you get more into socialism. It discourages people because they're working hard and they're seeing more of that efforts and that rewards be ripped away from them and handed to somebody else. So as much as it is hard to watch people make a ton of money, even for jobs that maybe aren't as, blue collar, it's, on the other hand, you can't just rip more money away from them because it could have counter effects on the economy.
Absolutely. And then that's just talking about citizens here, but unfortunately, there is a huge surge of illegal immigrants in this country. So does that apply to people that not necessarily are citizens? What do you guys think about that?
I don't think that people who come illegally should be able, obviously they can come and they can get health care because you can go to a hospital and you can be taken care of, but I don't think that they should be able to get on social programs that pay for their health care. If they want that, then I think that they should apply for citizenship first.
It is, like you said, it's tough to deny health care to people that might not necessarily have that, but all right, coming up next. Welcome back to the College Report. A senior official within the Department of Homeland Security has announced that the Trump administration will be deploying 100 tactical border patrol officers to work in coordination with the Immigration and Customs Enforcement in 10 sanctuary cities across the nation. The list includes cities such as San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, and Houston, Texas. The Trump administration says the new move is coming after these cities have it repeatedly limited their cooperation with immigration authorities. So to start, is the Trump administration wrong for trying to enforce these laws that our country already has?
I don't think he's wrong to enforce the law of the land because, like, if you don't have laws, then you have, people breaking them, obviously. So I think it sends a message to the citizens here that laws don't really matter if you're not enforcing ones like that.
I think that enforcing immigration laws are important, but the tactic of sending Border Patrol agents into these cities and these communities can seem a little bit forceful. And going into these communities where there are a lot of undocumented immigrants who have not committed crimes, who have contributed to the economy with their work, I think that that can be a little bit unsettling, not only for them, but also for the citizens within those communities.
And I think, when you think of undocumented immigrants, it's like, all right, these 50-year-old guys who are, manual labor under the scenes, like behind the crowds. But really, it's women and children that are a majority, too, that take up that population. And it sounds very brute, like you said, to go in there and just sweep them out. So in tactics of going about it in a way that's like not just sweeping them under the rug, what do you guys think are ways to they are here, right? That's a fact. So how do we take care of them in the sense of not just chucking them out on the street corner, but also upholding the laws, like you said?
Well, I think we definitely have to create a real path to citizenship that is viable for the undocumented immigrants that are here, make it affordable enough, expedient enough to have it be a viable option. Because right now it takes far too long for people who are already here to become citizens.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I think they do need to be citizens if they're going to be here. I don't think that they should stay undocumented, but I do think there are ways to make it easier, more affordable, so that people who haven't broken laws, who are living here, like he said, contributing to the economy, can become citizens. But I think they should still try to become citizens.
I think that there's a lot of statistics that we can look at that a lot of immigrants are nonviolent. They tend to benefit their communities where they are, and kind of just combat that with facts of like any fear of these immigrants, combat it with the facts that they tend to be beneficial to the communities that they're in.
So what do you think this type of message is sending to the American public in terms of voting? Because I think, you said there isn't a lot of crime with that population, but also they're also not wanting to have IDs with voting. So how is this going to affect America in the long run? What do you think, Amy?
Yeah, I think that it'll definitely affect people because America's kind of gotten this stigma as, the world's best country. And a lot of people are going to want to come here. But I know, especially on social media, people are saying maybe America's not that great. And I feel like maybe our reputation's going down a little bit. Maybe there'll be a new country that'll rise and be the one that everyone wants to go to. And I don't know how much that'll affect our economy and other things like that. But that might push the government to waking up and being, hey, maybe people don't think America's that great after all, and then it'll push them to make some of these changes.
I have a quote here from Lori Lightfoot, the Chicago mayor. She says, if anyone thinks they can come here to our city and terrorize our residents, they've got another thing coming. I mean, Chicago, crime capital of the world, it seems like. So in a city that there is so much crime, and a lot of it is to do with immigrants that aren't necessarily natural born here, how would you go about explaining that? And if you were a presidential candidate, how would you go about explaining that to the American public? Bailey, we'll start with you.
It's kind of hard because, obviously, if anyone has an evil intent, they can go out and do it, whether they are born here or not. But as the president, he has a responsibility to protect us. And if you have a place where you have MS-13, and a lot of those people do come from out of the country, then you have to start asking yourself, how do you let those people stay, I guess, when different violent crimes like that keep happening? I guess it's just about figuring out, it's hard how to keep the people here who are doing good and how to keep the ones who aren't out, I guess.
I feel like along that conversation too, it's not just immigrants that we tend to focus on a lot of crimes from immigrants and talk about that, even though that's less common than natural-born citizens. I think that goes into an overall criminal justice reform and how we enforce our laws and stuff like that. That should be overarching, not just dealing with immigrants, but dealing with crime as a whole. Like Chicago, yes, there are some immigrants that have committed crimes, but there's also a lot of native people in Chicago that are committing a lot of crimes. So it's a more holistic reform, I think, to the criminal justice system than it is necessarily just kicking immigrants out of a community.
And moving on to Chicago, which has gained national attention yet again as the city is dealing with another violent weekend with 26 people being shot, 11 of whom are children, even though Chicago already having some of the strictest gun control policies in the country. Some people still think more gun control is the answer, such as right here in Virginia, where a bill proposed by Governor Ralph Northam calls for the banning of assault-style weapons. This bill was recently voted down in the state Senate. However, Governor Northam has said he will continue to push for gun control in Virginia until new legislation is passed. So do you guys feel that more gun control is the answer? And that's such a broad question, but maybe be more specific, your experiences with it, and if you have any opinions on that.
I think that the Second Amendment is really important because I think our founders put it in there because they had come from a government where they were told, like a tyrannical government where they weren't allowed to, they had high taxes, they weren't allowed to do certain things. So it was like a protection for them. And once they established this country, they didn't want that to happen again. So they wanted to give the citizens a way to protect themselves. And we've seen in other countries, Germany, for instance, the first thing they did before the Holocaust was they took guns away from their citizens. So I think it's really important for protection. It can be, some people do use it as a hobby, but as a woman who conceal carries, I think it's important to be able to feel safe going to different places.
Absolutely. Andrew, do you think the Second Amendment needs to be somewhat revised or changed in any way, or do you think it's perfect the way it is?
I don't know that the Second Amendment necessarily needs to be revised, but I do think that under that we can put some common sense gun legislation on the table, like maybe a 30-day waiting period for an assault-style weapon, doing kind of the same thing you have to do to get a driver's license, and then sight tests, maybe some mental health checks, something like that I think would be a very fair thing and would still fall under the purview of the Second Amendment as it is now.
And with the awful attacks in Chicago, I mean, we hear that all the time in Flint, Michigan, where I'm from, it's rampant. So do you think there should be a limit of what people can buy, like terms of leveling, of maybe application process? Do you think there should be a limit, or do you think, you apply for a gun, you get the gun? What do you think, Amy?
Yeah, I would say if we're gonna have different, more violent kinds of weapons, there should be a hierarchy. Maybe you kind of start out, with a learner's permit gun. You start out with something maybe that has more of a safety behind it, and it's, easier to use, and it's not as violent.
All right, I'm gonna have to stop you right there. That's all we have for today, but be sure to join us next week on College Report. We are so happy that you tuned in. Yeah, tune in next week. Thanks so much.